The Spyro the Dragon trilogy began in '98 and ended in 2000. I've been told that there are other games in the series, but I found no evidence to substantiate these claims. Something about Elijah Wood and David Spade, but I don't know, sounds like an urban legend to me. All joking aside, I'm so hyped for the Spyro Reignited trilogy, so I thought I'd take a look at the original PS1 games and see how my childhood memories hold up to the reality of 2018. For this video, I 100% completed all three PS1 classics on my PlayStation 3. Unfortunately, the discs are in a box somewhere at my parents' house, so I had to use the digital download versions from the PSN store, which I think adds a lot of slowdown, which really hurt the experience. It's annoying to hear Stuart Copeland's awesome score change tempo whenever I move the camera around. Anyway, this technical issue is certainly annoying, but it doesn't ruin the experience, and as my journey began, I had a blast conquering the original Spyro the Dragon. Full disclosure, the original Spyro is one of those games, alongside Crash Bandicoot 2, Metal Gear Solid, and Max Payne 2, that I can pretty much complete in my sleep. It's a game that I don't play like a regular game. Not that I'm Steve Wiebe playing Donkey Kong or anything, but I feel like I know everything there is to know about this game, in and out, which has a tangible effect on the way I play the game. I know how to do everything in the game, so there's no exploration or discovery. I just turn into a machine who devours the game.
That was quite a ride, Spyro. You've learned a lot since you were a young glider.
Yeah, well, you could have found an easier spot to get stuck.
Spyro feels different from other 3D platformers of the era, and still feels unique today. It's not as heavy and precise as Mario 64, as fast as Crash Bandicoot, or as massive as Banjo-Kazooie. Spyro, having 4 legs, moves differently from those characters, and holding down the square button lets him charge forward, smashing through anything in his way, almost like a driving game at times.
Hey, what's on the other side of that river?
Why don't you glide there and find out?
You tap X to jump, then tap it again to glide. If you jump straight out from a charge, you get extra distance. The really hardcore players use that to sequence break and do all sorts of wild stuff, but that's all beyond the scope of my interest. The camera can be a hassle at times, but generally isn't as bad as other games from this era. For the most part, especially with the active camera enabled, the POV is always trying to remain behind Spyro's back, and when it works, you don't even have to worry about it. Sure, sometimes it gets stuck in an object or tightened when Spyro's back is up against a wall, but it's really not bad at all. By today's standards, using R2 and L2 to rotate the camera instead of the right stick feels archaic, but you get used to it. Now, gameplay is one thing, but what about the actual game? The setup for the original Spyro the Dragon is genius. Nasty Nork is a big jerk, and the dragons banished him, and he gets mad and uses magic to imprison the dragons in crystal. Spyro flies under Nasty's radar, so to speak, and the adventure begins. That's it. According to the instruction manual, he avoids getting knocked out because he was playing hooky. Yeah, Spyro is so cool he cut school. He's literally too cool for school. He's not like a mythical chosen one or any nonsense like that.
Thanks for releasing me. It seems like I've been trapped in here since I was your age.
No, no.
Why, I remember...
Gotta go.
He's just a kid who's the only one around to save the day. He's basically John McClane from Die Hard, but little. And a dragon, and purple. As I mentioned before, the soundtrack is by Stuart Copeland, who's best known as the drummer for The Police. At first I was surprised, but I think it definitely makes sense if you listen to the score for this particular level.
Spyro, you don't have to burn the ship tonight. Spyro, you don't have to burn all the ship tonight. Burn all the ship tonight. You don't have to burn all the the ship tonight. You don't have to burn on the ship tonight. Burn on the ship tonight. You don't have to burn on the ship tonight.
Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, was released the next year in 1999, and it brings about a whole heap of changes. The story is more involved, with a lot more cutscenes, secondary characters, and gameplay variety.
I hate dragons! Crush! Kill it! Kill it!
Ripto is so angry. I love the way he says that. So stupid, but so evil. Very presidential. Way to make Avalar great again.
Hey, give that back!
I go back and forth on whether I like part 2 more than I like part 1. There's so many mini-games and fun side activities that Spyro must complete in order to acquire orbs, but they're inconsistent in their quality, and the difficult ones require obnoxious trial-and-error memorization as opposed to actual skill. It's not as hard as it was when I was 10 years old, but I still failed the harder challenges a handful of times, and usually just for not knowing about something over which I had no control, and would be incapable of reacting to without foreknowledge of what lay ahead. The levels all have NPC allies who send you on missions and introduce minigames, which is fun, and they're often cute and funny, but it's less charming to me than just throwing the player in the level and letting them explore and figure things out as they go, getting hints from the dragons they rescue. There's nothing here that matches being overwhelmed by the endless supercharged ramps from treetops. One thing I really like about Spyro 2 is how it feels like every single graphical asset is brand new. As far as I could tell, there were no repeated graphics from the original game. The treasure chests are new, and treasure itself is redesigned. Even Spyro himself, I'm not 100% certain, but I think his model has been touched up a bit. But maybe I'm wrong on that particular front. For this game, Spyro has a bunch of new abilities, from climbing ladder textures, swimming on the surface and underwater, a jumping head bash move for busting boulders, and spitting rocks, which is gross. Spitting is bad. Don't do it. If you feel like you have to, you have a glandular disorder and you should go see a doctor. Either that or you're a baseball player like Lenny Dykstra. In which case, thanks for watching, Mr. Dykstra. You're my favorite Met. I actually don't know sports, but I only know you because your son is married to Jamie Lynn Sigler from The Sopranos, and she talked about it on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast. Spyro 3, Year of the Dragon, was interesting for me to play, since while I know the first 2 games like the back of my hand, I had only rented this one in my youth, and had never completed it 100% before now. Perhaps it's for this reason I'd say it's the weakest in the trilogy, but I do have some criticisms, as well as things that I really like, which are unique to this one. The skateboarding levels are really cool, and many of the minigames are equally entertaining. However, most of these challenges are segmented into their own side areas. On one hand, who cares? But the levels in Spyro and Spyro 2 are all set in one location, no load times. They're sandboxes, tiny open worlds with everything existing in the same virtual space. In Spyro 3, the levels feel smaller, mostly because so many parts of them are chopped off and made into their own little maps, which are accessible by these weird little portals. I don't love that, but I can deal with it. It's not a deal breaker. My biggest criticism is that there are a lot of reused assets, mostly from Spyro 2. Again, not a deal breaker, but it's definitely a sign that there was some more time pressure, a little time crunch, than on the previous games. The biggest addition to Part 3 are the 4 new characters: Sheila the Kangaroo, Bentley the Yeti, Agent 9 the Monkey, and Sergeant Bird the Penguin. They all have their own unique gameplay, and appear just often enough to mix things up without hogging the spotlight away from Spyro. Another thing that's fun about them is that they're all introduced being held hostage by Moneybags, returning character from Spyro 2, who represents everything evil about capitalism, which is awesome in an ostensible kids game. He's clearly a villain. You pay him to free the animals, and then the animals kick his butt.
I hope you appreciate this favor I'm doing in letting you out.
That's good of you, mate. No hard feelings, eh?
Right. After all, I'm just doing my job.
Part 3 has Spyro rescuing baby dragons, finding the eggs which hatch before your very eyes. They're not all unique, but they're still jolly. And there's nothing more heroic and righteous than saving little baby dragons.
Sorry, that was the ugliest chicken I've ever seen.
Spyro is still a classic. The camera may not hold up terribly well by modern standards, and a lot of the enemies, especially in the first game, don't look like much more than indistinct blobs of pixels, but it's still a great time and one of the best examples of the greatness that was the PS1 era.
Find the eggs and bring them back, Spyro. You're our only chance.
You got it.
I, for one, am glad that the whole trilogy is going to be available on the PlayStation Classic. After all, without Spyro and other classics like Crash Bandicoot, Legend of Legaia, and Jammer Lammy, what's even the point of a retro mini console like the PS1 Classic? What's that? None of those games are on it? What about Ape Escape? No analog sticks. Okay. Threads of Fate? No. Tony Hawk? No, the music. Yeah, I know that. Intelligent Cube? Oh, they got Intelligent Cube. Oh, great. A lot of demand for that one. I mean, it's good. It's good. It is good, but like, who cares? At least we've got the Spyro Reignited Trilogy on PS4, and you can bet you'll be hearing from me once I get my hands on that. I hope to see you then. Keep on playing.